Hello, and welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and with me, as always, is my friend and co-host, Chris Boroff.
I'm gonna get you, Goose. I'm gonna get you if it's the last thing I do. I don't remember there was any other dialogue in the movie about the goose.
A lot of animals. And also my friend and co-host, Zach Powers.
I'm a star!
Yes, welcome, and on the Movie Trap, just to give you a little summary of what this show is about, the three hosts that you just met watch three movies based off a theme picked by another one of the hosts, and then we watch all the three movies, and then after that, we are allowed to vote with an allocated amount of points, and then whoever's host's movie wins the vote, that host gets to pick the next theme. So we are in the middle of Chris Boroff's theme, due to the victory of, shall we say, ill-begotten venture with
Some
significant other.
gerrymandering. I was guilty
right.
of some.
Right. No,
playing with the
I
votes.
was.
I think before we get too deep into it, small production note. We are recording on the evening of July 2nd, Sunday. So if there is sound in the background,
There's not gunfire.
there may be some firework ambience
Yeah.
going on in
yeah.
the background. I've heard a couple around here today, so just as a heads up.
It went all night last night. It's going all day today. So yeah.
Yeah, that's America.
Yeah. Here we go. So yes, that is a good production note on everybody. So anyway, why we are here is because we are in the middle of Chris Boroff's theme of horror movies that have been recommended to you that you have not seen. And previously on the Movie Trap, we watched Significant Other, which was, a thing. And then it is now my choice, which is 2022's Pearl. Directed by Ty West. T West, did we ever get that nailed down? Have anybody ever clarified what it's pronounced?
Ty, but
I think it's Ty.
I'll go with Ty West. That's how it is. Sorry if you're listening, Ty, if we're mispronouncing it. But that's the way it's going to be. So, as I said, we all get an amount of points, so there were some bonus points divvied out last episode before we get into the meat of Pearl, to the mother of Pearl. Let's go with our points here. Chris Boroff, you have 12 points for final voting and 2 bonus points to give out. Russell, have 10 points with 2 bonus points to give out. And Zach Powers, you have 11 points with 2 bonus points to give out. So, with that in mind, Zach Powers, take her away. Not too far away.
Pearl, with the subtitle An Extraordinary Origin Story, is a recent 2022 sort of horror kind of slasher film, directed by Ty West, as mentioned. It was co-written by West, and its star Mia Goth, who reprises her role from X, which also came out the same year, 2022, only about 6 or 7 months earlier. I think they were filmed more or less concurrently in the same location. It also features David Corenswet, who, thanks to the timing of the recording of this episode, we'll probably talk about more than if we had recorded a couple weeks ago. Tandy Wright, Matthew Sutherland, and some others. Basically, it is a prequel to X. If you saw X, it revolves around a farmhouse where a bunch of people go to shoot a porno. They end up getting killed. But where did this killer, an old woman, come from? Well, she has her own origin. X taking place in the 1970s. This takes place in 1918. World War I is on. The Spanish flu is going around. And Pearl lives in a farmhouse in Texas with her German parents. Her stern mother and her father, who is basically totally immobile and cannot speak as a result of his run-in with the Spanish flu, while her husband is off serving in World War I, which is nearing its end. So her mother is kind of strict with her, forcing her to do chores, take care of her infirm father. But Pearl longs for a more exciting life. She thinks she can be a big deal star, a major talent. She wants to become a chorus girl. But she also has a bit of a dark side. Revealed early while doing her chores. For no particular reason, she kills a goose with a pitchfork and feeds it to a crocodile in the nearby lake. Which
is it a crocodile or an alligator?
I think it's an alligator.
It's an alligator.
Yeah. It's an alligator, I believe.
I don't know.
But one day, Pearl is sent off to pick up her father's morphine in town. And whilst there, decides to take in a movie. Afterwards, she runs into the projectionist outside the theater, who invites her to come back if she's ever in the area, saying he's kind of always there at the theater and can play any movie she wants to see. She begins to head home after he gives her a frame from the movie she just saw, Parade Follies. When she loses the frame, she chases it into a nearby field and sees a scarecrow and sort of has a daydream fantasy, but it begins with her dancing with the scarecrow and eventually making out with it, where she sees a vision of the projectionist and screams out, I'm married at it, before caving in and sort of humping the scarecrow and masturbating using the scarecrow, more or less.
And I'd like to just separately applaud Carlson for having to make Powers describe this sequence.
But her mother is angry about the missing money for the movie, and she's punished by not having a supper. But the next day, her sister-in-law, Mitzi, who's younger and wealthier, comes by and with her family, and they bring sort of a roast pig. And Mitzi tells her that there is there's an audition in town the next day for dancers for a traveling performance troupe, which Pearl latches onto immediately. That night, she sneaks out of her house and visits the projectionist in town. He apparently lives there. He's a bit of a vagrant who blows from town to town, living wherever he can. And he shows her a French porn film, and encourages her to pursue her dreams. And Pearl is sort of, she's at a crossroads. She says she can't just abandon her family, but also admits that she wishes they would die.
I mean, who hasn't been there?
Yeah. And she returns home to hear her mother sobbing in the next room. But the next day, her mom finds a program from the local theater, and is once again quite stern and angry with Pearl. She's reiterated it's not about getting what you want, it's about making do with what you have, more or less. Over dinner that night, because of the program, an argument breaks out. Her mother expresses a bunch of disappointment in her, says that she knows Pearl will fail, and that she feels that same sense of failure every time she looks at Pearl. This results in a pretty big, fight that ends with her mother accidentally getting lit on fire by the kitchen hearth, and being very badly burned. So Pearl naturally throws her in the basement, and leaves her father immobile and frightened, seated at the kitchen table, and runs back to town, where she has sex with the projectionist. And And the next morning, the projectionist drives her back to her home so she can get ready for her audition. Noticing the pig still outside, now infested with maggots, and meeting her father briefly, they go upstairs to attempt to, fool around, but a bunch of sounds sort of make the projectionist increasingly uncertain, and she says that it's just the dog in the cellar, and eventually they go down and she begins to show him around the farm, but he becomes unnerved with a lot of inconsistencies in her story, including the fact that she immediately forgets that she just said she had a dog. He is unnerved and attempts to leave, but Pearl becomes extremely upset by this, and as he is driving away in his car, stabs him to death with a pitchfork, and shoves his car into the pond that has the alligator in it. She dresses herself in one of her mother's gowns, which she was previously forbidden from doing, and apologetically smothers her father to death before heading out to the audition. She meets Mitzi at the audition, where she is determined to get the role, seeing it as her only way out of this place. She goes in, performs in sort of there's a sort of dream-esque sequence where there's a bunch of backing dancers and a backdrop and special effects for her performance. But she is immediately rejected for not being young or blonde or all-American enough, and breaks down on stage in front of everybody while seeing visions of her burnt mother telling her that she's been rejected. Mitzi takes her home to try and make her feel better. Once again, the pig's still on the porch. She says, Pearl admits that it's not just the audition. She feels there's something wrong with her, and she doesn't know how she would explain it to Howard. Mitzi offers to pretend to be Howard so she can sort of get out how she feels, what she would say to Howard. And this becomes a quite lengthy monologue, one unbroken cut on Pearl, who describes slowly, like, each sort of transgression she's made, how she feels bitter at Howard for leaving her at first, and then how she felt happy that she miscarried their child, and then that she had an affair with a projectionist, and finally culminating in her admitting to the 3 murders she had committed so far. Mitzi is understandably unnerved by this and attempts to make a gracious exit when Pearl says, sort of tries to guilt her into admitting that Mitzi was the one they ultimately cast in the role. Mitzi says that she was. It's sort of unclear if this is 100% the truth or if she's just trying to say what Pearl wants her to say. Regardless, as Mitzi is leaving, she chases her down with an axe and kills her. Then dismembers her and throws her body in the lake with the alligator. She goes down to the basement and lies with her mother, who was not immediately dead and tried to crawl up the cellar stairs, but eventually passed away. And then arranges her mother and her dad's corpse at the table with the rotting pig in the middle. And waits for Howard, who comes home as the war is now over. He sees the sort of terrifying sight, and Pearl is waiting for him with sort of a rictus grin that she holds for the entirety of the film's credits. And that is Pearl.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. Yeah, I quite like this film a bit, considering that I was kind of more or less disappointed in X, mainly because I think I hyped it up to the sort of otherworldly dementia that is like the movie it's cribbing on, which is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I was sort of expecting that, and then when it was just like a horny naked old lady, I wasn't all that impressed or terrified or didn't feel that was particularly macabre. This one did deliver on that towards the end with that. However, I think X is straight up more of like a horror movie, this one, I think, because if you've seen X, you kind of know where this is going, but if you didn't, you'd be kind of like, oh, holy shit. It wouldn't necessarily be like scary. You'd be more like, oh god, she's gonna do it again, isn't she? So I don't know. I liked it. Different vibe from X, and maybe that kind of served it that I didn't have the hype.
And I think something that'll continue in the third movie, Maxine, which follows the survivor from X, as she sort of makes her way in Hollywood more in the 80s.
Right. Also played by Mia Goth.
Also played by Mia Goth. Is that, each of the movies is very heavily influenced by a different period in film. Like the Scarecrow thing is like this weird homage to the Wizard of Oz, and it's like kind of that era of movie. Like it's all very like bright Technicolor kind of style, and whereas X obviously a little bit more like Grindhouse, Texas Chainsaw, but also the kind of, in the style, even the porn that they were making was very like low budget, just going out somewhere with the camera and shooting this thing kind of style. I think I liked X more than you. It's not, I mean, if you're expecting Texas Chainsaw, X is far more comedic than Texas Chainsaw is. This is also got a lot of elements of comedy mixed in. So I think, and I assume Maxine will probably continue that tradition. But it's
Did it seemed kind of interesting trying to figure out like what the things it's mixing were, like what the genre mixtures and things were, because I immediately picked up on kind of what you were saying, where it was like a Wizard of Oz thing. I noticed the they also had like a Psycho thing, like when they actually
Baby
pushed
Jane
the car into the.
Is what kind of came to me too.
The direct Ty West said that he described it as sort of a Douglas Sirk style melodrama, but like a sort of deranged one. So he was also, I think, in some regards, ripping off of that style.
For sure, especially like the long monologue at the end. For sure.
Yeah, it seems like his stuff might like. Have you guys seen a lot of other Ty West movies?
Yeah, I've seen. Let me look up his filmography to get an idea.
Because I think he did Innkeepers.
I've seen Innkeepers. I've seen Innkeepers, and I've seen House of the Devil, which stars Greta Gerwig in a small role.
She gets shot.
Yeah, she does get shot. That one is probably his most like straight up intense, like dark movie. And yeah, I've seen Innkeepers, which is like a spooky ghost hotel situation.
Yeah. It seems like most of his stuff is sort of like homages to different styles. Like he even did a spaghetti western in there at one point too, where they all kind of have that odd thing. But I noticed sort of to what you were saying in this one, Carlson, like in X, like that it was a straightforward horror film, but they also had moments of like really strange choices in terms of empathy for like who the character or who the writer decided to like describe. Like I did not have in any of the films an expectation that I would see like an octogenarian couple trying and failing to have sex. I didn't expect that in X. That was an odd sequence. It was separately a horror sequence, but almost a comedically handled horror sequence. But even like other weird things where it's just strange character development that I wouldn't expect, like the boyfriend who starts crying and decides to leave. Like he clearly gets in over his head talking his girlfriend, or tried to talk his girlfriend out of being in the movie that they're making, and that she winds up being in the movie anyway. And then he cries about it, which is just sort of an odd thing to see as a scene. Like usually if you see something like that, there's no moment of pathos. It's just, I'm angry, I'm leaving, and then the guy gets killed very quickly. So it was sort of strange how much focus was given to just the empathizing with the characters in an odd way, rather than like seeing them as just the stereotypes they'd normally be. So that was the one thing that kind of jumped out at me. It seemed like he was doing more than that. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
No, I do agree with that, because even in X, removed of Pearl, you do kind of empathize with Pearl and Harold a little bit, because they're just kind of off in their own world. Howard, excuse me. They're, like, I sort of think that you do kind of, there is a humanity inside of Pearl, even when she's this, like, kind of psychotic monster in X. So that's why, like, it's kind of like this movie's more like a companion than a sequel, like it's more like a companion piece to like, like you could watch this movie separately. I really do think, and I do think you'll probably be more rewarded by the sort of, psychopathy that happens at the end of it. Whereas when you see this, knowing what happens in X, there's a lot of things that you're just like, oh, now I get it. Like there's a certain context that I think is hard to do with movies that tend to be companion pieces, that this one can stand alone in its own right. And I think it is because of such a stylistic U-turn into the more melodrama, Douglas Sirk, fucking, Baby Jane sort of stuff. Whereas that's more the vibe in this one, like Psycho and stuff. In fact, like I read that originally he wanted this done in black and white, and when I think about that, I agree why he would, but I'm kind of glad he didn't, because especially the scene where Pearl kills Mitzi, that scene where she's in this very obvious red dress, and there's just this long dolly shot of her coming down, and that like Pearl's like, she ain't gonna let you walk out of here. No way, this is not happening. And the way that kind of builds up to that is almost funny, but that is like a very distinct moment of dread that I felt while watching this movie, and I thought it was pretty well done. And I don't think you'd get that kind of vibrancy if it was in black and white. I think having that kind of very greens and browns, and then this just speck of red kind of in the distance, and then coming at you as the shot and the scene continues.
I think that serves throughout the movie. There's some like really interesting shots of like when she's riding her bike back, and there's like the sort of illuminated fog over the cornfield, and like some of the dance sequences. Even the colors in the town are so bright. Mm-hmm. I think that the Technicolor was a good choice for this movie.
Yeah, I think it was a wise shift. And that's, I think that shows capability of a filmmaker, where you have an idea, but you're not entirely married to it. But, like, so a lot of his films are like homages of things. Are we talking like, Coen brother Tarantino world, where it's kind of winking at the camera a little bit, like letting you know it's kind of a movie? I think there's some of that in this with the musical rendition. Mm-hmm. What I liked about that, real quick, and then I'll move on. But like, I think the musical rendition in the background, it's all the like stock footage of World War I or whatever. It's like all this war shit. The soldiers are dancing.
It's
and
like
stuff.
A stage production, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's kind of predates film of that era. I mean, film looking like that wasn't until like the 30s and 40s. But still, it served its purpose of kind of Pearl's madness. And what I liked about it is that everybody's jaunty and happy while it's like a wartime thing. I thought that was an interesting juxtaposition. Sorry, you just didn't mention it in the summary, so I thought I'd get that up. Anyway, yeah, I thought wise choice. But anyway, back what I was saying, do you think this is more like when directors do homages to films, where do you draw that threshold of tolerability? Is what I want to ask.
I'll let Powers go first.
I don't know. I mean, compared to something like Hail Caesar or something, this is such a different type of homage, I guess. Because, I mean, for one thing, Barton Fink or Hail Caesar, so much of that is like, it's about the mechanisms of Hollywood at the time. It's not just about the style of what the final product looked like. And this is largely divorced from that. There's like some stuff about auditioning and casting and things like that, but it is largely just like a stylistic throwback or reference. So it doesn't feel quite a piece to like the way the Coen brothers or somebody like that would do it. Maybe closer to Tarantino, because he is a little bit more involved with just like replicating the visual look of certain things. I don't think this overstepped those bounds. I mean, I think when it becomes too hyper specific on like film, like maybe a specific film or film scene that they just, almost overly directly recreate, maybe sometimes that could cross the threshold. But even the Scarecrow is like an uncanny valley looking figure, and it's like it brings to mind Wizard of Oz, but it's not too like on the nose about it.
I'd kind of agree with that. I think for me, I usually have I like some homages. However, when you get pushed into like the Kill Bill level of homage, where it's the storyline itself seems almost secondary to the homages being made, I kind of hate that, because that seems kind of rote and dull a little bit. Like I'd rather see something where a new story is going to be told or something like that. Like for example, using Tarantino, I did not like Kill Bill, either of them very much, but I did like Jackie Brown quite a bit, and it's because Jackie Brown actually felt like a movie from the 70s without taking time to point out that it was supposed to feel like a movie from the 70s, which I appreciated.
Also helped it was from a book too.
Yeah, and he didn't write it himself. Yeah. Just another thing. Yeah. About this movie, I'm assuming you guys are already aware of like how Pearl came about, right? That it was a COVID break from shooting X.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah, and that like that's sort of the legend of the film, is that like while they were shooting X, there was a COVID quarantine, and Ty and Mia kind of came up with the backstory of Pearl, because in X, Mia Goth plays both Pearl and Maxine, like the only survivor of X. So apparently they had that's where they kind of came up with this, and A24 said, sounds good, and went on with it. And that's why but even without that, due to like the flu being kind of like an underpinning of this movie, I noticed that happened a lot post-COVID. Like that we would talk about this era, like it seemed like a lot of stories are very eager to kind of jump on this specific era right after COVID. Yeah. I just think that makes sense,
Yeah, I mean, people were pretty obsessed with it. I remember, like, starkly, like, they just kept, for some reason, not for some reason, literally just because of COVID, for like a year afterwards, whenever someone would do a short science fiction thing they threw on YouTube, it would always be something where people are wearing masks or people are having to take their temperatures before doing something. And it was like, yes, I get that this is what you're doing right now. I assume in the future it might not be this way anymore, but no one knew. So they just decided to throw it in as like, it's such a dystopian future. It's like now, but after now. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. And I guess at least acknowledging that this has happened before, and you didn't have people like saying vaccines kill you or whatever. I'm sure you did, but
I mean,
not as many, maybe.
Yeah.
Here's a question: Do you guys think the story works? Because that was something that surprised me. Like the fact that Pearl was essentially an add-on movie that happened during another movie, but I don't know. Do you guys think that it shows signs of being something that was written in that period, or do you think that it would stand on its own properly? Like, it's
especially like I don't think this like the main way the Spanish flu interacts with the movie is like it's what made her father sort of infirm and paralyzed, but it doesn't feel like it's overly obsessed with that or with World War One, really. Like it's it's about this girl whose whole world is like this farmhouse basically, and I think it works pretty well. I think a lot of that is also down to like Mia Goth like really goes for it in this movie. Like she has a number of scenes that are like she really nails, that are like tricky scenes, like long shot tricky scenes that she she does Like the end, even just the ending with like this "call me by your name" but fucking psychotic sort of thing going on. Yeah,
I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name, but I'm assuming it ends a similar way.
it ends with Timothée Chalamet like looking into a fire and crying about his lost love, but it's very earnest and serious, and he doesn't have like a psychotic smile on his face, obviously.
It sounds like I might like this one better than that.
I cannot possibly agree with you more about Mia Goth in this movie. She absolutely was transcendent. I mean, I thought that she was breathtakingly good. And I think that's why this movie works, Borif, to answer your question. That she, considering that this movie, yes, is just basically, like I said, a compendium of like, you know, it's the Silmarillion of X. You know, this is how we got here. I thought it worked quite well. But even to kind of push back on the sort of anxieties of World War I and the flu and stuff, part of me does kind of get that in the sense of how it kind of reflects COVID, is that she is kind of locked down on this farm and trapped and you know, you can't go anywhere. And this movie is more or less like the perils of escapism and fame, especially when you mistake those two things as positive affection. You know, like, so that in the end, I think, is what kind of makes this movie work. And if anything, kind of gives you more color to the monster that was in X. So in that respect, I think that, I think it works pretty well, actually. And it helps that, again, the divergence of style between X and Pearl serves it very well. And makes you excited for the third one, considering 85 Hollywood, you know. Nothing scary about that, you know.
Well, the 85 in Hollywood, it's probably going to be a lot about Reagan, maybe AIDS. We'll see what happens. It seems very strange, because it's like, I also wonder, like, just what, like, doing this twice, like, making a solid horror film or horror-related film twice is tricky. Doing a third one, I kind of wonder where they're going to end up going, because it's like you don't have Pearl anymore. She's passed away.
Well, you don't even have the farm.
And yeah, but you know, I mean, obviously, I assume they'll lean more into the trappings of what horror movies were in the 1980s. Maybe even a little bit like action movie. It looks a little gritty based on what I've seen, which is very little. But it's like Maxine with 3 big X's in the middle, you know, and kind of like a metal font for the logo. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm definitely, I mean, I hope it works, and I'm definitely planning to check it out. So, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, he's certainly earned the benefit of the doubt. You know, like, I think he, you know, Boris, right. Like, 1, 2, sure, but doing 3, that's rough. Trilogies typically don't work out.
And it is an interesting trilogy, I think, or going to be, because, I mean, Pearl dies in X, and so, like, there's this weird handing of the baton in that movie from one central character to another, which is a very interesting format for a trilogy. I can't really think of anything else that, especially something that was like this plan that does that. So,
I don't know, maybe Godfather. Like, I think there's like an attempt at a handing off, but yeah.
But Al Pacino's in all 3. Like, yeah. Michael Corleone is pretty much the main dude.
Well, Mia Goth will be in all 3 too, but I understand
but
how
not the same
it's
character.
Significantly different. Yeah. These 3
I
films
sort of
are going to be based off like how, if Mia Goth continues to be as charismatic as she has been in the previous 2, I can't imagine she would stop. But I don't know. Did you guys discover her through this, or did you guys find? Like, how did you guys hear about Mia Goth?
I'd only seen X, and yeah, so pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
It is kind of funny when you get this actor.
No. I'd seen her before. I've seen her in a couple things. The 2018 Suspiria she's in.
That's the one I knew.
Oh.
And the 2020 version of Emma, the Jane Austen book. She plays Anya Taylor-Joy's best friend. If you need a frame of reference for who this character is, so Clueless is a retelling of Emma, if you don't know that. The Brittany Murphy role is the one Mia Goth plays in Emma. Yeah.
The friend,
so
the
I
friend
have
foil.
seen that, but I
the
totally
sort of
missed
ditzy
that.
friend who's like new to this society, and she takes her under her wing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I did see that Anna Taylor-Joy Emma, but I totally forgot that Mia Goth was that character.
I'd seen Suspiria. I also saw like Infinity Pool like a couple weeks ago or months ago. I can't remember. Time is strange. But yeah, I'd seen her in those two. I was just very surprised because it seems like whenever they talk to her outside of the film she's doing, she seems pretty, a little bit down to earth in the interviews. She seems like a working actor, like a normal person. It's just funny to me that, similar to Jamie Lee Curtis, like she's just become like the it girl for horror right now, and she's in much stuff.
It's her and her co-star in X, Jenna Ortega, are kind of like the big horror like scream queens of the moment.
Yeah, well, she went off, and Jenna Ortega's now doing Wednesday. So
yeah,
I'm kind
she's
of
got
wondering.
roped in with Burton. She's going to be in Beetlejuice 2, apparently, as Lydia.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's one of the main people in like the new sort of Scream era. Yeah.
So here's a question. You briefly mentioned this in the intro, and then no one picked up the baton on it. How strange is it going to be to see the projectionist as Superman? Because he seems a little sleazy in this.
That's somebody I had never encountered prior to watching this. David Corenswet. I know he's been in some other stuff. It's stuff I didn't watch. I think he maybe was in House of Cards or something. I didn't watch that shit.
I didn't remember him from that.
Me neither.
I don't know. I looked him up
until it was unwatchable.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
There were
the British
problems.
Version's very good.
There were a few problems.
British
Just
version's
a brief issue with the lead star.
I haven't seen We Own This City yet. Apparently he's in that. But
we're still recording. That was just one thing that stopped. I think we're okay. Let me double check. Okay, give me the file. I need to be able to see how much file space we got left. Don't kill me. Don't crash. Oh, I need to. Give me a second. Gonna delete something.
Wayne Knight's gonna show up. Ha ha ha! You didn't say the magic word. Ha ha ha! You didn't say the magic word.
No, it was just a sudden need for a lot of space that came up. So just need to empty that. Sorry. We will obviously cut this chunk out as I'm clearing hard drive space so that we can keep talking about. Such a thrill. Such a thrill. Okay. What day is it today? Is it the 30? It is 30. Okay, so that is the old one. I'm going to delete the old one. Good. Okay. Sorry about that. I think we're back to safety. We can keep going.
So I'll just continue with what I was saying. Apparently he was also in We Own This City, which I haven't gotten around to yet.
What character did he play in that? Because I did see
based on the Wikipedia, he plays a member of Maryland law enforcement named David McDougal, a veteran investigator with Harford County Narcotics Task Force.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah. Good show, by the way. If you like The Wire, that's really up your alley. Really bleak, real happy endings.
But Superman does seem like a big step up for this guy's career.
For sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
James
and
Gunn has
kudos.
been doing some incredibly strange casting lately. Or it's like, I shouldn't say strange, it's just been like, he keeps finding like completely unknown actors, or mostly unknown actors, and then putting them into lead spots. So it's interesting.
Yeah, he doesn't go for the obvious choice, and to pick a relative unknown to play, the guy, bold, very bold. But that's typically, most Supermans get kind of plucked out of nowhere. Like Henry Cavill didn't do much, and I can't imagine Brandon Roth did much before or since. So
I would go so far as to say potentially that ended Brandon Roth's career.
Yeah, more or less
doing that.
Yeah, more or less. And then, Henry Cavill's going to go play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. So good for him. And he was good in this one as kind of like a guy that you can tell almost immediately wanted out of the situation, like almost immediately. And for Pearl to not catch on that until it's far too late. is builds onto, like I said, it's once that happens, you're like, oh, buddy, this is not going to go well for you, homie. Like, this is not going to go well.
I mean, you kind of, I don't know if you guys felt this, but I immediately was like, something's going to go wrong with this guy, because he's just, like, introducing himself as a bohemian. Seems like he's kind of gone on the make. He's showing a young lady
seems
porn,
like a
strange.
misdirect. Yeah, it seems like that's an intentional misdirect where you think this guy's the trouble or, like, going to be the cause of, like, all this, you know, horrible shit going down, and no, Pearl's the one who all along was the one you needed to watch out for.
Yeah. Which I said, which, you know, I think that this movie could have made it more problematic with Pearl, being that if you'd seen X and you know this is a sequel to X, you kind of know where Pearl is going to end up. But I think that this movie more or less overcomes those hurdles pretty handily, partially because of Mia Goth's pretty mesmerizing performance, and partially, because, like, you sort of think there's a path out, and each path out gets ripped away from her, and knowing what you know about X, you're like, well, that ain't good. So it still made it fun and the way it's kind of presented to you is still entertaining. So I thought, you know, so where do you guys kind of compare the two between X and I know Zach kind of said he kind of prefers X a little bit more to Pearl. What about you, Borif? Where do you kind of land? Because I think I kind of land. I think I prefer Pearl a little bit more than X. But I'm not the biggest kind of horror movie guy.
I do think Pearl is more unique than X, but when I was a teen, like, slashers were, like, my thing for so long. There's something about a more traditional slasher formula that feels like home to me a little bit, I guess.
Got it. Sure.
You know, I'll say, I think I'm actually going to say that I think I liked Pearl a little more, but not because X wasn't really good. I think the thing is that I knew where X was going, and I had no idea where Pearl was going, so I just paid more attention when Pearl was happening, because with X, pretty much... It surprised me with character choices, but the overall arc of people dying, I kind of was like, okay, I see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're going to have a final girl. We're going to have a whole lot of death. Yada, 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 yada. But with Pearl, I had no idea where it was going, except for the fact that two characters I knew would be alive by the end, Pearl and her husband. Those are the only two that I knew would make it. I appreciated that the husband didn't show up until the end, so it didn't, like, annoy me with, like, having me deal with, like, multiple characters that I know are going to make it through the entire thing. At the same time, it would have been interesting to see a little bit more with the husband, just because he seems a little pragmatic to the point of psychopathy in X. And he doesn't seem quite that in the first one. From the brief scene he walks in and looks completely shocked. So yeah, that's kind of where it sits for me. I don't know how do you? I think you guys said it. You prefer.
I think
Pearl?
I think I kind of concur with Zach here. I think, like, as a horror movie, I think I prefer X more because I think it's much more of, like, the thrill ride you're kind of looking for. I think this one was more interesting because of, well, you know, when the violence does happen. Like, especially with Mom, like, you could tell that there was brewing, and once it hits its apex, and then she goes to the projectionist, and you sort of think that, okay, maybe this is a way, and then no, she's just gonna, and then to about Howard, you know, I do kind of like that, you know, he only gets, like, 3 lines of, like, you know, that's it, and you don't even see the reaction to, that creepy final shot of Pearl, I think, considering that you have X there, I don't really need to know. I think probably the circumstances of X have happened before. I'm willing to bet between the 1920s and the 1970s. I'm willing to bet it's happened before. So maybe his sort of, like, I don't know, I guess tolerance of Pearl, or rather more like a guardian of Pearl. It's like he's got a rabid dog, so he just kind of keeps her in a chain and just kind of keeps her locked up and chases away people. But, you know, production company's going to pay me a couple $100, so I got to take it, you know.
Yeah. She seems like she definitely has some functional issues in terms of basic comprehension of reality at times, which is interesting. Don't quite know how that would work with an actual character, but it is very scary when you meet someone who doesn't have the ability to track their own lives within, like, saying that a dog, and then forgetting that a dog exists moments later. It's a little disturbing when that happens.
Yeah, she clearly has, like, she sees things and has, like, these sort of hallucinations and stuff occasionally. But borrowed observation from a friend of mine is that Pearl has more or less the exact same plot and trappings of an older film style over a modern movie as the Joker movie. Literally a guy trying to go on stage. He's got mental problems, an overbearing mother, goes on stage, fails miserably, and becomes violent as a result of societal pressure. The end, he has a big confession and kills somebody afterwards, and it's all in the style of an older style of film.
That's weird. I haven't seen that movie yet. I've been kind of refusing to, mildly.
And he also has breaks from reality.
Is it worth going and seeing The Joker?
I would say it's worth it for Joaquin Phoenix's performance and end of list. And the soundtrack rules. I like the soundtrack quite a bit. The score.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix does a good job with it. I'm curious about the sequel that's a musical with Lady Gaga.
Not curious about it. I am very not curious about it. I'm sure it'll be, can't wait. It'll be Sweeney Todd. I don't know. I think
I will say that I am curious because whenever I hear of something that is such an extreme choice, I'm always interested to see where it goes, what comes out.
Such a different tone, choice from the first one.
Right.
Did really well. That's interesting to me.
Yeah. And then then this time, they're paying Joaquin Phoenix like a bag. He's getting a bag of cash for this movie. Because watching the first movie, the sheer physicality that he put himself through, you can't do that. And
it also made $1 billion. So.
That also helps. Yeah, that also helps. Yeah. I also think that I think the Joker movie sort of drew too much of attention of the movies it was cribbing instead of this one. I didn't even catch the Scarecrow bit with the Wizard of Oz until you brought it up just now, but now I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. Whereas in Joker, it's Taxi Driver, it's the King of Comedy, it's
they even got Robert De Niro showing up in there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, So, whichever, it's fine. My problem with the Joker, Borif, is that you probably could have seen that movie and it not be called the Joker, and it would have been a fine movie, but because they try to shoehorn the Batman lore into it, that's where you're going to roll your eyes a lot. Especially because Batman's 8. I never understood that.
It's very strange. And
did they have him show up in the movie?
Oh yeah.
Is it like a?
Yeah, he's a little.
He's
kid.
a plot point.
His dad, Thomas Wayne, is a character more so than him.
I like Pearl more than I like the Joker.
It's definitely
Pearl's not going to get nominated for shit.
And it's a very different type. It's not like any other version of the character of the Joker that I've ever seen.
It's true.
All right.
It's true.
Yeah.
I might give it a shot at some point. Seems odd.
I'll say again. Pearl was, I think, a far more better and cheaper and less cast. Nobody was in this movie. You could tell this movie was kind of a COVID movie, right? It's all outside. Everybody is outside and very, spaced out. You can kind of tell. Which is, I get it. You got to do what you got to do. But good job. I didn't notice until if somebody told me, oh, this was a COVID movie, I'd be like, oh, well, I get it now. So yeah, good job. And again, utilizing this didn't get a very big budget, but they really did squeeze every dollar they could for the set design and making it feel like a time period piece, because that's not always cheap to make a period piece, even if it is in a sort of isolated locale like this is supposed to be. Still not cheap, so well done indeed. Well, good production value, very well done.
All right, well, it sounds like we might be to final thoughts there. It seems the train kind of coming into station.
Sure.
Cool. I'm ready for that if you guys are. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go random here. Borif, you go first.
Well, I mean, my final thoughts on it are that it's definitely an interesting little movie. I'm going to be curious how this one ages, because in like 10 years, will it be a movie that I think of on its own, or is it something that will always be, oh yeah, that was also part of the X thing? Yeah, it's definitely worth seeing. I think it's a reasonably breezy view. It didn't make me particularly wait for anything to occur. Like it generally like played out its moments very quickly and got to the point. And yeah, if you're into horror and if you're into the character of Mia Goth playing Pearl, then yeah, this is something you'd probably want to watch.
Okay, Zach, why don't you go and then I can wrap it up and then you can tell us your movie.
Yeah, I think Pearl is a really strong, especially for one that was sort of not immediately like clearly. I think they must have come up with this idea and put it together relatively quickly, and I think it came out really well. I think like stylistic choices are great. There's a lot of really memorable cinematography in this thing that looks really good in my opinion. The performances are strong. In particular, Mia Goth is like really, really exceptional. Like that long monologue and the ending shot, both like really great stuff. I think that yeah, they it's less of a straight horror movie than X, but I think the blending of genres and like the tone and tones and stuff is really well executed. It's never jarring. And one thing I will say, in some regards, I actually think that so my girlfriend really enjoys Pearl a lot. She has a Pearl shirt she wears sometimes. I think this movie also has a special appeal to women based on some of the responses I've seen. I think like young women in general, like have this a strong response to Pearl, because I think there is something about like the limited options afforded to women and accepting of stations and that kind of thing that is a little more resonant than that we maybe didn't discuss in our conversation, because we're tragically all cis straight white men.
Yes.
And shouldn't be doing a podcast for that reason. But but yeah, Pearl's really solid. I'm excited to see how they conclude this trilogy. I hope they land it, because I think it'll be like a really, if they do, I think it'll be just a really unique neat little trilogy that just kind of exists in its own little bubble, does its own unique thing, and I think could be a really unique set of movies.
Yeah, I concur as well. Yeah, I think that if you didn't really particularly care for X, I suggest you watch Pearl, because for some reason watching Pearl made me like X a little bit more and kind of understand of where this all was going with what's at the root of Pearl, which is like fame and escapism and not going to take it anymore. So I appreciated that a lot, and I think that because even in X, Mia Goth is playing double duty as victim and monster, it was kind of refreshing just for her to sink into one role and absolutely knock it out of the park. I don't think there's any debate about that. I think that she does a lot of heavy lifting in this movie and doesn't even break a sweat. Like you said, that 17 monologue you're enraptured by it, and that is tough to do for one shot. I mean, that's really hard to do. But even the smile, because what makes that smile so creepy, and I think it's brilliant move on West's part to sort of leave that as the crystallizing image, that you could see how this turns from it almost hurts her to kind of keep the smile going. You can see the pain and the distress in her eyes as she maintains that look, and it happens over it's a very slow moving car wreck. Very hard to do, and I very much respect that. That being said, you know, I like that this movie was sort of in its own pocket, and it is another one of like the sort of many bells in A24's bonnet that, you know, they keep coming out with the sort of, you know, very much different style of horror movies while still kind of being horror movies and being what you kind of watch them for anyway. So on that note, resounding success. I'm glad it was recommended to me because, like I said, I think the recommendation was apt, that if you didn't like X, check out Pearl. You might like X a little bit more. And I, at least in my case, found that to be true. I'm going to go ahead and give Zach a point real quick for bringing up the female interest in this, because I think that that's very, very true, because it is a topic that is constantly put on, because especially when you contrast her mother to Pearl, where her mother's very Protestant and very, you know, like, anything outside of work is immoral. You know, so
it's almost Calvinist.
Yeah. So like and that I think was a useful sort of character dynamic, and sort of you could understand why anybody would fucking snap.
Or in some regards, the projectionist who, you know, Pearl's so desperate to escape, and his life is, I just go wherever, find a job and live there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. But even Mitzi, you know, like she's kind of as star obsessed and, you know, looking for an escape route out of this town as well. I didn't feel like that was cartoonish. I didn't feel like she was like your typical sort of like Southern Belle sort of like, oh, I can't wait for you to get killed sort of thing. So I'll give you a point for that one, Zach, because I thought that was, we didn't talk about it, and but I did think it should be underlined.
We should have had ladies on.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. We could, you know. Sorry, guys. All right. Well, that concludes Pearl. Only 1 point was given out, and that was by me to Zach Powers for bringing up the women. So, yeah, that was fun. So, Zach, you have 12 points for final voting. Chris, you have 12 points for final voting with 2 bonus points. Zach, you have 2 bonus points as well. I have 1 bonus point with 10 points for final voting. Okay, so that brings us to movie number 3 and Chris Borf's theme of movies that were recommended to you that you have not seen. And Zach Powers, take it away.
Specifically in the horror genre, if I'm not mistaken.
Specifically.
Yeah, so this one I've heard about for a long time. I have never gotten around to it. Like Pearl, I have a suspicion it's like not strictly horror, but I think it is horror enough to qualify here. It's 1981's Possession, which I have never gotten around to seeing. But I have heard recommended to me before. Never seen it. Yeah, so that's what I'll go with.
I have a feeling this is going to be a black cup of coffee.
I think it's fun that we're doing the 80s. I think that's awesome.
This is the Sam Neill, Isabella Adjani film, right?
Yes.
Okay, we are in for a time. Okay.
I have not seen this, so like I said, I'm sort of happy that we're kind of getting out of COVID to go back to the 1980s at least. So I have never seen this, but Sam Neill rocks. I'm all about that.
I haven't seen it either. I have heard of it talked about a lot, but it's one of those films where it's much like how you've probably heard it. People always talk about how crazy it is, how wild it is, how you should see it, but it always has seemed like a tall order to actually take out the time to see it. So I look forward to actually doing that this time and seeing what it's about.
All right, so we're talking for an extra pot of coffee then. All righty. Well, that will be fun. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And, yep, you know, we're rolling out the episodes as we get on, but life be busy, and we just do what we can because we do this for fun, not for money, obviously. With that in mind, join us next time for 1981's Possession to round out Chris Borf's theme of horror movies we have been recommended to but have not seen. Thank you for joining us on the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and I have been joined by Chris Borf.
I don't remember any of the lines from the movie all of a sudden.
Well, you only get the one take. You're moving on. All right.
You could watch the rest of the movie for free. I don't know.
Okay. And I've also been joined by Zach Powers.
Scolding in German.
That's better.
Surprised we didn't even bring up the alligator's name. It's Theta.
It is Theta.
You know, yeah.
Theta.
Yeah.
Theta.
Theta. All right. Well, thank you once again. And as we always say here on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom. It's the Movie Trap promise.
It's the movie trap promise. Yep. Yep. Theta, probably named for the silent film star.
Definitely. All right. We'll see you guys.
May I have this dance?